I jolted awake, my heart pounding in my chest. The recurring nightmare of finding that damning email on Aaron's laptop had become all too familiar lately. As I reached for my phone to check the time, the harsh glow of the screen confirmed it was well past midnight. Aaron still wasn't home. I sighed deeply, the frustration and loneliness I'd grown accustomed to settling in once more. When had our marriage taken such a sharp turn? Aaron used to be the most attentive and loving husband a woman could ask for. But over the past few years, his obsession with work had consumed him, leaving me to fend for myself more often than not. Memories of our early years together flooded my mind. The way he used to look at me, his eyes sparkling with adoration, the spontaneous weekend getaways and romantic gestures that made my heart flutter. Those were the moments that had made me fall head over heels for him. The moments that had convinced me he was my soulmate. But lately, those moments had become few and far between. Aaron's constant business trips and late nights at the office had driven a wedge between us, and the distance only seemed to be growing wider with each passing day. As I lay there staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but wonder if the suspicious email I'd found was just the tip of the iceberg. Was Aaron really working as hard as he claimed, or was there something or someone else occupying his time? The thought made my stomach churn, but I couldn't ignore the nagging suspicion any longer. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. With a heavy heart, I rose from bed and made my way to the home office. Aaron's laptop sat closed on his desk, as if taunting me with the secrets it held. I took a deep breath and opened it, my fingers trembling as I navigated to his email inbox. There it was, the message that had set off this whirlwind of doubt and mistrust. A innocuous-looking email from an unknown sender, but with a subject line that made my blood run cold. "Can't wait to see you again, my love." I felt the tears welling up in my eyes as I read and reread those words, each time feeling like a knife to my heart. Was this proof of Aaron's infidelity? Or was I simply letting my insecurities get the better of me? One thing was certain, I couldn't let this go unanswered any longer. As soon as Aaron walked through that door, I was going to demand answers, and if he was lying to me, there would be hell to pay. The sound of Aaron's key turning in the lock sent a jolt through my body. I quickly minimized the incriminating email and composed myself, my heart racing in anticipation of the confrontation to come. As he stepped through the door, Aaron's eyes went wide with surprise at seeing me still awake. "Marta, what are you doing up so late?" I fixed him with a stern glare, the anger and hurt I'd been bottling up for months finally bubbling to the surface. "Where have you been, Aaron? And don't give me that working late excuse again." He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I told you it's this big project I'm overseeing. It's a make-or-break deal for the company. And yet you have time to send flirtatious emails to other women?" I spat, slamming the laptop lid shut with a bang. Aaron's face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb with me," I shouted, shoving the printout of the damning email in his face. "Who is she, Aaron? Tell me right now, or so help me." He recoiled, holding up his hands in a placating gesture. Whoa, calm down. It's not what you think, I swear." I scoffed, feeling the tears of betrayal stinging my eyes. "Really? Then what is it, Aaron? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been carrying on an affair behind my back." Aaron's jaw clenched, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt cross his features. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a mask of indifference. "You're overreacting, Marta. It's just a harmless flirtation, nothing more." "Harmless?" I echoed, my voice dripping with disbelief. "How can you stand there and lie to my face like that?" He sighed again, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Look, I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression, but I promise you there's nothing going on. This project has just been incredibly stressful, and sometimes I let off a little steam by flirting online. It doesn't mean anything." I stared at him, searching his eyes for any hint of sincerity, but all I found was a cold but detached gaze that chilled me to the bone. In that moment, I realized that the man standing before me was a stranger, a far cry from the loving, attentive husband I had once known. "You know what, Aaron?" I said, my voice low and trembling with barely contained fury. "I don't believe a word you're saying, And if you think I'm just going to sit back and let you continue to disrespect me and our marriage like this, you've got another thing coming. Aaron's brow furrowed, and for a brief moment I thought I saw a flicker of concern in his eyes. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that same infuriating nonchalance. "Marta, please," he said, reaching out to touch my arm. "Don't do anything rash. We can work through this, I promise." But as I jerked away from his grasp, I knew in my heart that there was no going back. The trust that had once been the foundation of our relationship was shattered beyond repair, and no amount of empty promises could fix it. "Save it, Aaron," I spat, turning on my heel and heading for the bedroom. "I'm done listening to your lies. From now on, you're going to have to face the consequences of your actions." As I slammed the door behind me, cutting off any further protest from Aaron, a single thought ran through my mind. If he thought this was over, he had no idea what was coming. The shrill ring of my phone jolted me from my restless slumber. I squinted at the caller ID. It was my older sister, Beth. "Hello?" I croaked, my voice still thick with sleep. "Marta, it's me. I'm sorry for calling so early, but I just had a feeling something was wrong," Beth said, her tone laced with concern. I sighed deeply, the weight of the previous night's confrontation with Aaron settling back onto my shoulders. "You could say that." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "It's Aaron, isn't it? What did that bastard do this time?" Despite the gravity of the situation, I couldn't help but crack a small smile at Beth's protective nature. She had never been Aaron's biggest fan, always claiming there was something off about him that she couldn't quite put her finger on. "I found an email on his laptop," I began, the words catching in my throat. It was from some woman calling him my love and saying she couldn't wait to see him again. Beth let out a low whistle. "Wow, he's not even trying to hide it anymore, is he? That slimy son of a bitch." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. I confronted him about it last night, but he just brushed it off as harmless flirtation. Like that's supposed to make it okay? "Of course he did," Beth scoffed. "Men like Aaron think they can get away with anything. They lie and cheat and manipulate, and then expect us to just roll over and take it." Her words struck a chord deep within me, fanning the flames of anger and resentment that had been simmering since my discovery. She was right. I had spent far too long letting Aaron walk all over me, making excuses for his behavior while he carried on without a care in the world. "Well, not this time," I said, my voice taking on a steely edge. "I'm not going to just sit back and let him continue to disrespect me like this." There was a pause, and then Beth spoke again, her tone slightly softer. "What are you going to do, sis?" I took a deep breath, the beginnings of a plan formulating in my mind. "For starters, I'm going to gather more evidence. If he thinks he can just sweep this under the rug with a few empty promises, he's got another thing coming." "That's my girl," Beth said approvingly. "You document every little thing, every shady email, every suspicious phone call. Build an airtight case against that lying snake." I nodded, feeling a newfound sense of determination coursing through my veins. "And that's just the beginning. By the time I'm through with him, Aaron is going to wish he never laid eyes on that other woman." Beth let out a low chuckle. "Atta girl. Give him hell, Marta. He deserves every bit of it and more." As I hung up the phone, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For too long I had been the victim, the dutiful wife pushed aside and disrespected by her unfaithful husband. But no more. From that moment on, the tables were turned, and Aaron was the one who would be made to pay for his transgressions. With a newfound sense of purpose, I got to work, meticulously documenting every shred of evidence I could find. Phone records, credit card statements, anything that could shed light on the depths of Aaron's betrayal. And as the incriminating trail grew longer, so too did my thirst for vengeance. Because at the end of the day, there was one thing I knew for certain. Aaron Thompson was going to get exactly what was coming to him, and I was going to be the one to deliver it. Over the next few weeks, I became a woman possessed, consumed by the singular goal of exposing Aaron's infidelity once and for all. Every spare moment was dedicated to tracking his movements, scouring through phone records and credit card statements for any shred of evidence that could shed light on his betrayal. And slowly but surely, the pieces began to fall into place. Late-night calls to an unknown number, charges for fancy dinners and hotel rooms that certainly weren't for business purposes. It was all there, right in front of me. A damning paper trail that left no doubt in my mind that Aaron had been carrying on an affair behind my back. But it wasn't until I stumbled across a series of flirtatious text messages that the full picture finally came into focus. The woman's name was Clara Evans, a 30-year-old project coordinator at Aaron's firm. And from the looks of things, she and Aaron had been involved in a torrid affair for quite some time. The messages made my stomach churn. The pet names, the suggestive language, the blatant disregard for the sanctity of our marriage. It was all there in black and white, a brutal reminder of just how little Aaron seemed to care about me or our vows. As I sat there, staring at the damning evidence before me, a wave of anger and humiliation washed over me. How could he do this to me? To us? After everything we'd been through together, how could he so callously throw it all away for some cheap fling with a woman half his age? In that moment, something inside me shifted. The hurt and betrayal I'd been feeling gave way to a burning desire for revenge, a primal need to make Aaron pay for his transgressions in the most public and humiliating way possible. And that's when the idea struck me. I knew from the messages that Aaron and Clara had plans to meet up for a romantic dinner that weekend at a fancy restaurant downtown. The perfect setting for a little surprise reunion, I thought to myself with a wicked grin. The next few days were a blur as I meticulously planned every last detail. I booked a reservation at the restaurant under a fake name, ensuring I'd be seated close enough to Aaron and Clara's table to cause maximum disruption. I even went so far as to have a new dress tailored. A slinky little number that was sure to turn heads and make Aaron realize exactly what he was throwing away. Finally, the night of reckoning arrived. As I stepped into the restaurant, my heart was pounding with a heady mix of nerves and anticipation. But the moment I spotted Aaron and Clara sitting in a cozy corner booth, all traces of doubt melted away, replaced by a steely resolve. "Well, well, well," I announced loudly, striding toward their table with purpose. "Isn't this just a cozy little date night?" Aaron's head whipped around, his eyes going wide with shock and fear as he registered my presence. "Marta, what are you doing here?" I fixed him with a withering glare, reveling in the way he seemed to shrink under my gaze. "Oh, I think you know exactly why I'm here, Aaron. This little charade of yours has gone on long enough." Clara, for her part, looked equally stunned, her perfectly made-up face twisted into an expression of abject horror. "Aaron, what's going on? Who is this woman?" I let out a derisive snort. "I'm his wife, you little homewrecker, the one he's been lying to and cheating on for God knows how long." The restaurant had gone deathly silent, all eyes trained on our dramatic confrontation. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew I should feel embarrassed, ashamed at causing such a public spectacle. But in that moment, I couldn't bring myself to care. Aaron was the one who should be ashamed of the lies, the betrayal, the utter disrespect he'd shown me in our marriage. And I was going to make sure the whole world knew it. "This little date ends tonight," I spat, leaning in close so only he and Clara could hear me. "You want to know what real karma looks like, Aaron? You're about to find out." The aftermath of my dramatic confrontation at the restaurant played out like a surreal blur. Aaron and Clara had scrambled to gather their things and beat a hasty retreat, their faces twisted in matching expressions of shock and humiliation. As for me, I simply stood there, reveling in the stunned silence that had fallen over the dining room, savoring the sweet taste of revenge. It wasn't until I got home that the full weight of what I'd done finally hit me. As the adrenaline wore off, a nagging sense of doubt began to creep in. Had I gone too far? Would Aaron ever be able to forgive me for such a public shaming? I shook my head, steeling my resolve. No, I couldn't afford to second-guess myself now. Aaron was the one who had brought this upon himself with his lies and infidelity. If anything, he should be grateful I hadn't done worse. Still, when he finally stumbled through the door a few hours later, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of apprehension. His face was pale, his eyes haunted, and for a brief moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Marta," he began, his voice little more than a hoarse whisper, "what you did tonight, I don't even know what to say." I fixed him with a cold, hard stare. "You don't have to say anything, Aaron. I think my actions spoke loud and clear. He winced, as if my words had physically struck him. I know, and I deserved every bit of that humiliation. But please, you have to believe me when I say that Clara means nothing to me. It was just a fling, a moment of weakness that I deeply regret. I scoffed, shaking my head in disbelief. Do you really expect me to buy that? After everything you've put me through, all the lies and the sneaking around? Aaron's shoulders slumped, and for a moment he looked utterly defeated. You're right, I don't deserve your trust or your forgiveness. But I swear to you, Marta, from the bottom of my heart, I will spend every day making it up to you if you'll just give me another chance. His words hung heavy in the air, and for a brief moment, I actually found myself considering his plea. A part of me, the part that still clung to the memory of the man I had once loved, wanted desperately to believe that he could change, that we could somehow find our way back to the happiness we'd once shared. But then another voice, sharper and more insistent, cut through the haze of doubt. This was just another one of his lies, another empty promise designed to lull me into complacency while he continued his despicable behavior behind my back. Well, not this time. You know what, Aaron? I said, my voice taking on a steely edge. I think I will give you another chance. His head snapped up, his eyes shining with a glimmer of hope. Really? Oh, Marta, thank you. You won't regret this, I swear. I held up a hand, cutting off his effusive gratitude. Don't thank me just yet. This is your one and only chance to come clean, to tell me everything about your affair with Clara and any other indiscretions you might have been hiding from me. And if I catch you in even the smallest lie, so help me God, you'll wish you'd never been born. Aaron visibly paled, but to his credit, he didn't back down. You have my word, Marta. No more lies, no more secrets. I'll tell you everything. I swear it. I nodded, fixing him with a hard stare. Good. Then you'd better start talking. And Aaron, I added, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, don't leave anything out, because I promise you I will find out eventually. And when I do, there will be hell to pay. As Aaron began to spill his sordid tale, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. He might think he was being given a second chance, but in reality, this was just the calm before the storm. Because no matter what he said, no matter how convincingly he begged for forgiveness, I knew in my heart that our marriage was already dead. Aaron had made his choice, and now it was time for him to face the consequences, and I would be the one to deliver them. In the days following Aaron's tearful confession, I did my best to play the part of the forgiving wife, nodding along as he laid out his grand plans for rebuilding our trust and making amends. But on the inside, I was already plotting my next move. True to his word, Aaron had come clean about the sordid details of his affair with Clara, but what he didn't know was that I had already set the wheels in motion for a far more sinister revenge, one that would make his indiscretions with that little homewrecker seem like child's play. It was Ethan, my old friend from college, who had first tipped me off. A private investigator by trade, he owed me a favor after I'd helped him out of a jam a few years back. And when I reached out to him about digging into Clara's background, what he uncovered was a tangled web of lies and deception that went far deeper than any of us could have imagined. Turned out, Clara's fling with Aaron was about more than just satisfying her twisted desires. No, this was a calculated move, a long con designed to bleed my husband's company dry from the inside out. She's been embezzling funds for months, Ethan explained, sliding a thick manila envelope across the table towards me. Funneling money into offshore accounts, using Aaron's access codes and inside knowledge to cover her tracks. I felt my blood run cold as I flipped through the damning evidence. Bank statements, wire transfer records, all of it meticulously documented and irrefutable. But how? How could she possibly have gotten her hands on that kind of sensitive information? Ethan shrugged, his expression grim. Your guess is as good as mine, but from what I can tell, she's been playing Aaron like a fiddle this whole time, using their affair as a way to keep him blind to her real motives. A wave of nausea washed over me as the full weight of Clara's deception hit me. Not only had the little snake been sleeping with my husband, but she'd also been using him as an unwitting pawn in her twisted game, putting his career and reputation on the line, all for her own selfish gain. In that moment, any lingering shred of sympathy or pity I might have felt for Aaron vanished, replaced by a burning desire to see him and Clara get exactly what they deserved. "We have to take this to the authorities," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "Get that bitch arrested and make sure Aaron gets dragged down with her for aiding and abetting her crimes." Ethan nodded grimly. "You got it. I'll make sure this evidence gets into the right hands, anonymously, of course. Can't have anyone tracing it back to us." I nodded, a grim smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "Of course. We'll let the wheels of justice do their work for now. But make no mistake, Ethan, by the time this is all over, Clara and Aaron are going to wish they'd never crossed me." As I left Ethan's office, I could already feel the weight of Aaron's deception lifting from my shoulders, replaced by a sense of grim satisfaction. For too long I had been the victim, forced to suffer the humiliation and heartbreak of his betrayal in silence. But not anymore. Now the tables had turned, and it was Aaron's turn to face the consequences of his actions. And this time, there would be no second chances, no empty promises or tearful apologies. This time, he was going to learn the true meaning of karma, and I was going to be the one to deliver it. The days following Ethan's revelation about Clara's embezzlement scheme were some of the most tense and emotionally charged of my life. As much as I tried to maintain a facade of normalcy around Aaron, the simmering fury and resentment I felt towards him made it nearly impossible. Every time I looked at him, I saw not the man I had once loved, but a pathetic fool who had been so blinded by his own selfish desires that he'd allowed himself to be used as a pawn in Clara's twisted game. The thought of it made my skin crawl. Still, I knew I had to keep my composure, at least for the time being. Ethan had assured me that the evidence he'd uncovered would be more than enough to bring Clara's crimes to light, but we needed to bide our time and let the authorities do their work. Of course, that didn't stop Clara herself from trying to worm her way out of the impending disaster. About a week after my meeting with Ethan, I received a frantic call from the little snake herself, practically begging me to meet with her in private. "Please, Marta," she pleaded, her voice thick with desperation. "I know you must hate me after everything that's happened, but I swear I never meant for things to go this far." I scoffed, barely able to contain my disgust. "Save it, Clara. I know all about your little embezzlement scheme and how you've been using my husband as your own personal patsy." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, and for a moment I thought she might try to deny the accusations. But then, in a small, defeated voice, she spoke again. "So that's what this is all about," she murmured. "I should have known Ethan would come crawling back to you eventually." I felt a surge of satisfaction at the realization that she knew the jig was up. "That's right, Clara. Your little game is over, and you're going to pay for what you've done, both to me and to Aaron." There was a pause, and then she let out a bitter laugh. "Aaron? Are you kidding me? That spineless worm was just as complicit in all of this as I was. He knew exactly what was going on, and he was more than happy to turn a blind eye as long as he got to keep sticking his pistache." "Watch your mouth," I snarled, cutting her off mid-sentence. "Aaron might be a lying, cheating scumbag, but he's still my husband. And trust me, he'll get what's coming to him, too." Clara let out a derisive snort. "Yeah, right, like he'll ever face any real consequences for his actions. Men like him always seem to skate by, while the rest of us take the fall." I could hear the bitterness and resentment dripping from her words, and for a brief moment, I almost felt a twinge of pity for her. Almost. "Well, not this time," I said, my voice taking on a steely edge. "I'll make sure you both get exactly what you deserve, one way or another." There was a long pause, and then Clara spoke again. Her tone resigned. "Fine. Do whatever you have to do. Just let me know when and where you want to meet. I at least owe you that much." I smiled grimly to myself, already formulating a plan. "Don't worry, Clara. I'll be in touch, and when I do, you'd better be ready to face the consequences of your actions, once and for all." As I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction. The endgame was finally in sight, and soon both Clara and Aaron would learn the true meaning of karma, and I would be the one to deliver it. The weeks following Clara's arrest were a whirlwind of chaos and turmoil. As the sordid details of her embezzlement scheme came to light, the shockwaves reverberated through Aaron's company, leaving a path of destruction in their wake. At first, Aaron tried desperately to distance himself from the scandal, claiming ignorance and pleading his innocence. But as more evidence of his involvement surfaced, the illicit use of his access codes, the suspicious wire transfers, the damning paper trail that seemed to implicate him at every turn, it became increasingly clear that he was far from the unwitting victim he claimed to be. I watched from the sidelines as his once promising career went up in flames, his reputation dragged through the mud, and his professional life left in tatters. A part of me, the part that still clung to the memories of the man I had once loved, felt a twinge of sadness at seeing him brought so low. But that small flicker of sympathy was quickly extinguished by the knowledge of the depth of his betrayal, not just to me, but to the company he had sworn to serve faithfully. In the end, he had proven himself to be just as selfish and morally bankrupt as Clara, willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of his own twisted desires. As the dust began to settle and the legal proceedings against Clara moved forward, it became clear that Aaron would likely avoid any serious jail time, at least for the time being. The evidence of his direct involvement was simply too circumstantial, the prosecutors claimed, and without Clara's full cooperation, nailing him for aiding and abetting her crimes would be an uphill battle. I should have felt relieved, I suppose. After all, seeing the man I had once loved rot behind bars was never my intention. But as I watched him slink away from the courthouse, his head hung in shame, and his once bright future reduced to ashes, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hollow victory. Because as much as the authorities might have let him off easy, there was no escaping the fact that his life as he knew it was over. The lies, the betrayal, the utter disregard he had shown for me and our marriage, it had all caught up to him in the end, and now he would be forced to face the consequences for the rest of his days. A few weeks later, as I was packing up the last of my belongings in preparation for my move to a new city, a fresh start, far away from the painful memories of our life together, there was a tentative knock at the door. I already knew who it would be before I opened it. "Marta," Aaron said, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked haggard, his once handsome features etched with lines of shame and regret. I wanted to apologize one last time, for everything. I regarded him coolly, feeling nothing but a hollow emptiness where the love and affection I had once felt for this man had resided. "Your apologies mean nothing to me now, Aaron. You made your choices, and you'll have to live with the consequences." He nodded, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I know, and I deserve every bit of it after the way I treated you. He trailed off, shaking his head. "I hope that someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me." I let out a bitter laugh. "Forgive you? Aaron, you're lucky I didn't have you thrown in jail alongside that little tramp you were so eager to risk everything for." A flicker of pain crossed his features, but he didn't argue. We both knew I was right. "Just go, Aaron," I said, my voice heavy with finality. "Go and try to pick up the pieces of the life you've ruined. As for me, I'm done. Our time together is over, and I'm ready to start fresh." He opened his mouth as if to protest, but then seemed to think better of it. With one last lingering look, he turned and walked away, disappearing from my life for good. As I watched him go, I felt an unexpected sense of peace wash over me. The long, arduous road to revenge was finally at an end, and while the journey had been painful, the satisfaction of seeing karma served made it all worth it in the end. A new chapter was beginning, I realized, one free from the lies and betrayal that had haunted me for so long. And as I took one last look around the empty house that had once been our home, I couldn't help but smile. Revenge might be bittersweet, but it was exactly what I needed to reclaim my life and move forward, stronger and more resilient than ever before.